Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Live Ultralight Podcast. Today, we have a trip recap to cover. It was a pretty dang amazing trip. I'm really excited to share the details on this trip, but also cover some of the topics such as how to stay comfortable in camping in cold, wet conditions. Talk a little bit about maybe visiting national parks not in the peak seasons, and a few fun things like that. So, as per the usual, we've got the whole crew on here, Tyler, Derek, Brigham, to come and share their experiences on this trip. It was definitely a fun one. So I'm excited to hear how it went for them and some of their key takeaways from the trip. If you're new to the podcast, this is the Live Ultralight Podcast that is powered by Outdoor Vitals. And we bring you this podcast to inspire you to get outdoors and help lighten your backpack, build your confidence, and just get you outside more often. Something we truly believe in here is that by getting out more, disconnecting more, getting in nature more, it will benefit your life mentally, physically, emotionally. Just has a big impact in this tech-driven world that we live in. So with that introduction, there's one other thing to cover before we dive in. As we speak and as we sit here right now, we have just launched our Black Friday sales event. We did it early this year, so if you're listening to this podcast, you do want to pay attention to it. We are doing site-wide discounts, 10% off for the general public, 15% off for members, as well as giving free items with every order. So giving away pyro putties and no-so patches. Those are just going to be randomly put into different packages for any order, if I'm correct. But then also, if you were to spend over $250, you get a free 1/8-inch foam pad. If you spend over $500, you get a free dry bag with those orders, as well as the discounts. So those are going to stack on top. So lots of savings to be had. Definitely an exciting time. We've had a tremendous start to that sale. So it's been a lot of fun to watch that come in. And maybe I'll even ask these guys towards the end what they might consider purchasing on that sale if they were going to buy something during this time period. So, okay.
One more thing before we move on, just real quick. If you're at all interested in some outdoor gear this season at all, now is the time to check out our sale. We do have installment plans, so if you're short on funds, that's not a problem. You can basically break down the cost of any gear item into 4 payments that don't have any no interest at all. And if you're waiting for Black Friday sales actually on Black Friday, you're going to miss out the best deals. These are going to be the best deals we have this year. And so don't wait till Thanksgiving. If you get to Thanksgiving or pass it, you've missed all the best deals. So now is really the good time to check out some of the stuff that we've got on the website.
We're just talking through some stockouts that are looming as well. So
That is definitely one thing to consider is with this crazy day and age, there could be stockouts at any given time without warning. So waiting isn't always the best answer when it comes to getting gifts. I can attest to that. I am the worst at buying ahead of time with my own Christmas shopping and holiday season shopping. And it's stressful. It's stressful to wait. So do yourself a favor and order early. So anyways, our shameless plug. That's our shameless plug. We'll go ahead and leave that to rest for a minute and talk about what you guys really want to hear about, which is backpacking, some tips and tricks, some things that we adapted and whatnot. So let me give you a high-level overview of this trip. If any of you guys want to stop me, correct me, change my story when I start, getting off tangent, let me know. But essentially, this trip was about bringing some PR people, some public relation people out here, writers, YouTubers, things like that, and letting them try our gear, giving them an experience with it, and just enjoying Zion National Park. So as the trip got closer, the weather, we just happened to schedule right on top of a very cold snap. And so we did have to alter our plans a little bit. We switched from doing the West Rim in Zion National Park to do what's called Lavercan Creek, which is where we drop in from like the Zion Traverse Trail, if you're familiar with that. It goes from the Zion part of the park to the Kolob side of the park. So we drop down and into Kolob Canyon or Lavercan Creek Canyon and slept down there. But we kind of altered that trip to get out of the wind a little bit and to sleep at a little bit lower elevation and hope that it would be a little bit warmer. But it was definitely looming that we were going to have rain, snow potentially, colder, wetter conditions. And in fact, it looked bad enough that we kind of got the question posed to us of, should we cancel this? Should we move this? Should we go south? And me and Tyler debated that a little bit. And basically we said, yeah, we've got confidence in the gear. We've got confidence in this that we can keep everyone comfortable and happy. And so we went ahead and went forward with it, which I think turned out pretty good, but you guys will find out. So all in all, the trip was probably about 13 miles of hiking. So not a massive trip, but you're kind of starting halfway through the first day and ending halfway through the second day. But absolutely spectacular views. So yeah, that's the high level overview, but let's maybe dig into the nitty gritty on this. Anything you guys want to say, I guess, before, like in the planning stages of this, or just considerations that we had as we were planning this trip? I know maybe for starters, Tyler, you got kind of hassled a little bit when you're picking up the permits on what we were doing, even going in there, right?
Yeah, I hassled the ranger plenty as well with other questions, but yeah, she said a few funny things. The first thing that she said was, "You know what the forecast is for tomorrow, right?" And it's like, "Yeah, we've been watching it for weeks." She's like, "Okay, well, just know that since you're the one picking up the permit, if someone gets down in there and they get cold and they start a fire, you're never coming back to Zion." And I was like, "Okay, oh, yeah. I know that." She's like, "You guys have good enough gear?" I was like, "I think we have good enough gear." and so she was really staunch about me knowing that it was going to be cold, there was going to be snow and rain, and that under no circumstances were we going to be able to make a fire if we got cold. They just did not want to have any thought of an exception being made for that. So that was fine. We knew that we had good gear, and that we were staking more than just being cold on a trip like this by taking lots of influential media people into the frozen desert. Like, if it's one thing if we get cold on our own trips, it's another thing if a magazine writer or a YouTuber gets cold in our gear. So
yeah, I guess you could look at that as a risk, but I think we had a lot of confidence that we'd be well off, so we went for it, right?
There were some definite cons in planning and preparing, just kind of like knowing it was going to be cold and debating back and forth whether or not we should reschedule, and the fact that we did switch last minute to another trail from the one that we were originally going to go hike. But there was also a number of pros to hiking in Zion National Park this time of year, and I think one of those was apparent early on when we were even just trying to get permits for the backcountry. Zion has become so popular over the last few years, and it can be pretty tough to get any of the permits, but it was substantially easier to reserve those for this time of year and the types of trip we were doing. So I think there are definitely some pros.
If you showed up on the day of, you could have had your pick of any permit. I don't think anyone was going to be picking up permits.
I don't think anybody was out there hiking that
We didn't see anybody.
So. We saw a couple groups on the second day, but not on the day we went in.
Yep.
So,
and some of them they looked like they had backpacking gear, like one of the groups. But I wonder if they actually were going to stay or if they were going to just kind of call it as is, But yeah, it's definitely easier to get those permits, easier to plan. I think that's one of the things just to consider is, take it how you want it. But basically, since 2020, national parks have been slammed. And things like permits and opportunities in them have gotten lower and lower, but they're beautiful. They're national parks for a reason, and so sometimes you have to work around, hitting the Grand Canyon in the most optimal week of the year, or going to Zion, and whatever it is, going to Yellowstone. It's been I was pre-2020 when I went to Yellowstone, but I can't imagine what the conditions are like, and so just keep that in the back pocket if you're struggling to find times to go see some of these places. It's the same mountain range in the winter as it is in the summer, and in our case, I think it was twice as beautiful to go there when we did. So,
well, I think there's something to be said to that actually, because, and I'm not going to say this applies to every situation or every place, but there's a number of places I've gone that, if you look online, when's the ideal time to visit such and such destination, and you go in the opposite time of the year. Those have been some of my favorite places I've ever been, because I went during the I guess not ideal time of year. One is Zion. On our trip, just barely, the weather just made the red rocks and the cliffs just look so much more beautiful and amazing.
So much contrast.
Yeah, it was incredible. And you can't see that on a bright sunny day. Granted, hiking around on a bright sunny day is great, and it's still beautiful, but some of the views you get, if you've got the right gear, to me it's well worth going in those off-season times. Another place would be, when I visited Finland, I went in the dead of winter on purpose because I had the gear for it, and some of the stuff you can see
because the ticket prices were next to nothing,
right?
The
ticket prices,
those things matter, right?
But the things you can see and experience sometimes in the off season are just because it's the off season. I guess to make it short doesn't mean you're not going to have some amazing things to experience and see.
Yeah. Well, I think the opportunity is that if you go in non-peak seasons or the off season, you're likely to have scenery that is not nearly as common in like the photography and the magazines. So like Zion, every once in a while, like you see pictures of Zion in the wintertime with, a little dusting of snow, and it's beautiful. But most of the pictures you see of, especially like Utah's Big Five national parks, most of the time the scenery people are accustomed to seeing is like, blue skies and heat. The picture gives that feeling. So yeah, I think that's another thing to keep in mind is like you will see maybe a different perspective of whatever park you're going to just by changing your seasons by 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. I honestly thought Derek was going to say, going in the off season, going to the Dominican Republic isn't all that bad. The water's 5 degrees colder, but
not even that.
It's true. You did go to Finland, and it was still good. So I wonder. As you say that, I wonder if I could even name the Mighty Five, or whatever the heck they called those off the top of my head. I just don't. I just don't pay attention to
the Big Five.
I know parks. The national parks. I like to go to the national parks, but I also don't heed them, right? So I'm just gonna try this. So Zion, obviously, Bryce, Arches, and Canyonlands, or
those are separate? Those are
two separate. Okay, just want to. And then Capitol Reef. Is that the last one? They count as an okay. Yeah. Just making sure.
So you got
just making sure.
Easy
peasy. Easy. Yeah. But I just don't focus on them because there's just so much out there, to see. But
I have to drag Tayson into Zion, and he's always complaining about us going to Zion and using wag bags. And
I'm always happy to not do national parks.
Yeah, honestly, the last time I've been in Zion in the last 5 years, the main canyon, we did a tiny little hike. There's people everywhere. We're standing under this beautiful waterfall, or overhang, and all of a sudden we just start hearing people yell and scream, and someone had taken a fall or having a seizure. That's they're having. We ended up, you know what I mean? But it was just there's just so many people. It's just a different experience, and so I think I don't know. I think I can speak for me and Brigham at least. We don't necessarily seek out some of those places. However, I'd love to go to Zion in the winter. I've hiked some of those hikes when it's cold out, and it's in a lot of ways it's better. But
really, anytime you're going to do a backcountry trip, you're not going to be dealing with throngs of people because
then it's more of a
campsites are so limited. So we don't want to discourage anyone from going and doing a backcountry trip in Zion because they're phenomenal. If you go in the peak times, you're just going to have a hard time.
We're just going to say national parks, not necessarily our backyard park here, Tyler.
You're just going to
want to discourage people from visiting
park.
National parks, not Zion. And we need to get our permits when we get our permits.
The point is, if you go a little bit more in the off season, scenery's probably going to be just as beautiful, just a little different than what you would expect, in a good way, and probably have a lot less crowds, and you might not even encounter anybody at all.
And the other point is, every time I take Tayson, his mind is blown, even though he doesn't go to Zion on his own.
What, my mind is blown what?
With how amazing it is.
Oh. It is beautiful. They're national parks for a reason. Yeah, absolutely. Anywho, so we start this, I don't remember what day of the week it is, but around Wednesday. Lunchtime, we had lunch at the trailhead, and we started hiking in through a trail called Hops Valley. And that was a really pretty trail. It's just this long, it kind of starts off just flats, and then it drops into a canyon. Just this long, beautiful canyon that drops all the way down into Kolob National Park.
Colab Canyon.
Yeah, Colab Canyon, Colab National Park. I guess that's confusing. Maybe we need to specify.
Colab Canyon is like the furthest north section of Zion National Park.
It's not its own national park, but like for all intents and purposes, they're pretty well separated. They are like completely separated.
Yeah, you can't access Colab Canyon from the main canyon or the main shuttle service. So.
The only way you can access it if you start at the main canyon area is if you hike there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the northernmost section of the Zion Traverse. The hike that we did for this trip was about a third of the Zion Traverse.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite a third.
So we're dropping in there. I thought that canyon was really, really pretty. Things to highlight. We were kind of expecting to get rained on the way in. We for sure were expecting rain to come down around 5 p.m. and then potentially turn into snow that night. But we also encountered, a couple creek crossings. I remember I put my trekking pole down in a hole. And it was there's just nothing there for like 3 feet deep. So it's definitely in some of that area where you could get, that quicksand or like kind of those weird pockets, which was interesting to see that. That is one thing to keep your eye out for out here in the West. But drop down in and it was just beautiful. We will have some footage on this. It'll actually be a part of a video called Best Backpacking Candy for the Trail or something like that, where we freeze dried a bunch of candy and took it on the trip and tried it out. So if you want to see footage of this trip, definitely watch that video and you'll be able to see just how pretty this is. But drop down the main canyon or this side canyon, really, really pretty. Get down to camp. I think we got there around 3:30ish, something like that. And but it had just started to rain as we were getting there, and so it was a bit of a scramble to get people's shelter set up. A lot of these people, it was their first time ever, setting up a 40th, trekking pole. This trekking pole shelter, some of them, I think it was their first time ever using a trekking pole shelter. And so I was trying to give them, some extra help and pointers. And I regretted after the fact, the first person, this is just your herd mentality. I thought this was kind of funny. And in retrospect, I just was kicking myself. But like when we very first got there, it started raining. And so the first person kind of dove under a tree and was like, I'm going to pitch my tent right here underneath this tree for a little bit of extra shelter. And then everyone kind of was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And so they found these areas, and I was trying to help them pitch these shelters under these trees. And the ground's not level; it's all bowed out, like big time bowed out, and you're crawling around under a tree trying to pitch the shelter. And for those of you that are pitching these shelters are waterproof. Just pitch them on the flat ground. That's what I did. After I helped them all get their shelter set up, I went and pitched mine on the flat ground. And at a very, very top pitch, it took me, I think Tyler timed me. What did you say? It was like 3 minutes to pitch my shelter?
It was like 4.5 minutes.
Yeah. That was with the extra guy outs and stuff too, right? You counted those. So it was a quick, easy pitch and just something to consider. But I want to kind of circle back to trekking poles, shelters at some point in this and have a conversation on that. But got things pitched. We pitched a couple tarps and hung out.
It was like
the
sleeting
tarps
on us when we were trying to set up. We had beautiful, no rain hiking the whole time until right when we got to camp. And then that was where it started to unload. So we were all getting kind of wet while we were trying to set up. So it was like a scramble to get it going. And Tayson and I set up our Delano tarps first so that the group would have a area to hang out and be dry, because we didn't want to all sit in our own tents for 4 more hours before bedtime.
How'd that work for you?
What? Setting up the tarps?
Keeping you dry before bed.
Those
it
tarps,
kept everyone else dry.
Those tarps give us a lot of entertainment for the rest of the night in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Tyler just had the worst spot you could have underneath the tarp.
And it kept dumping on my leg. But my pants dried out and got soaked 3 different times through the night, even in the very cold temperatures. So it was good product testing.
So we get the shelter set up. We go hang out underneath the tarps. We're hanging out. We filmed the video. Started playing dice, actually. Started playing dice for candy is what we started playing, right?
You had to buy in with whatever good stuff you had.
Yeah, a couple people threw in some different candy and started playing, and that was entertaining. It was a really fun, good time. We laughed hard, and we played clear till 9 at night. I think.
Yeah, we played a long time.
Which, I mean, it gets dark
We actually quit at 10.
Quit at 10?
Yeah. We got into camp. I think you were a little bit off when we got to camp. It was more like 4:30.
Okay.
And then by the time I got things set up, it was pretty much time for dinner at 5:30. By the time everyone was kind of done wandering around, setting up tents, setting up stuff inside their tents. And then once we had dinners, dice came right out. We sat there for another 3.5 hours playing dice.
The perfect.
Yeah, I was just retroactively
game.
turning it back to daylight savings time, but
Oh.
yeah, I mean we had a great time. We had our dinners there. The tarp was much more comfortable to just sit in a group environment and not like go straight into your tent at 6:30 at night or whenever. So that was a lot of fun. Tyler though had definitely the worst spot underneath the tarp. He was in a spot where every once in a while the water like kind of build up and then roll off of it because we didn't have where we pitched the tarps, they weren't totally taut and in a fantastic
It was
spot.
That's what I was going to say. Is
real janky
comfortable is
pitch.
relative, meaning we weren't sitting out in the middle of an open field in the rain.
Yeah.
We were protected from the rain, but I would say it was fairly uncomfortable because the tarps were like pitched right next to each other, sort of overlapping amongst a bunch of juniper trees
With
and
like 1/2-inch thick limbs,
just
so the
like
tarps had
sort
a
of
lot
some
of
branches,
sway.
but like the branches were low enough that like the tarps were pitched very low for a group of 8 people.
9.
So we were all like crouched in there with our knees up by our heads, sitting in there.
Says Brigham, the guy with the nice flat rock. He wasn't sitting in a puddle like the rest of us.
Well,
was
nice flat rock. It was 4 rocks that my butt held
stacked.
together to act as one to keep my butt 2 inches off the dirt.
Also, Brigham's foam pad isn't a multi-use foam pad.
No.
It's a sleeping pad fastener only. It only goes in the tent under the
Well,
sleeping
especially
pad.
if it's raining and my tent's over there and I didn't want to get up and pull it out from underneath my sleep
I
system.
thought you were doing that deliberately because my pad. Well, I had a learning
It
experience.
also was, you guys and your pads, man, they're filthy.
Yeah.
They're filthy.
Dude, this is the first. My pad, no. Usually my pad is just fine. But this time, my spot underneath the tarp was not the best one. It was, me and Tyler had arguably the worst spots. And I was sitting in this hole where I was trying to like dig a hole around where I was sitting to divert water from like draining underneath mine. But basically, when I finally called it a night, I was like, I had basically some water broke over and came right on top of the pad. And when I picked that thing up, it had sat in water long enough that it had actually absorbed some water. And I mean, it was like heavier. It was just soaking wet and filthy. I did have to shake it out and rinse it off in the shower over the weekend because it was too much.
You guys are gonna hate me when I tell you about my seat underneath the tarp.
I don't even want to know. I was so like kind of bunched up, like trying to play lean forward that it was stressing like this inner muscle on my leg to sit that way because I was having to hold myself up that way that it like the next week it was sore actually.
I did have a big flat rock, but I didn't stop there. I had 2 smaller rocks underneath it. I had a legitimate stool. A very comfortable height, no knees up in my face. I was just sitting on the nice
No
little
water
chair.
dripping on you.
No water. I had my foam pad folding up completely out of the mud on this flat rock, so it stayed clean and it was soft. I was living the dream, just hanging out all evening and
I had a
sitting
nice
there.
seat.
You see how the hierarchy goes here, guys. The boss gets the worst spot. These guys all just
Leaders eat last. Haven't you read that?
I think, yeah.
Well, to be fair, I mean, I'd done my fair share of work cleaning out all the mud and water and stuff out from underneath this stuff, and I happened to find rocks along the way, so I took the liberty of using the rocks I found.
No, that is true though. I could have done a little more prep work when we started crowding in there to go find some rocks and sit. But all right, we've probably talked enough about sitting on rocks.
Well, the funniest thing about the
this
rocks,
podcast is not the Sit on Rocks podcast. I don't think.
the funniest thing was when someone pulled their phone out and they started measuring the levelness.
Oh yeah,
of our
because we
game
were
table.
rolling the dice on a flat rock. The nicest rock under there was this big flat rock, and the dice kept rolling off the side.
And you would lose points if the wood die got in the mud because I borrowed that from someone that I had to give back clean. So then all of a sudden the phone comes out and we're like checking the level of the rock every few minutes to make sure it was as level as possible for the dice. It was just part of the game.
Someone and who I won't name kept leaning on the rock and tilting it, but no, it was a really fun time. And I think just one takeaway from this is sometimes by bringing something like a tarp for a community area, it can definitely add fun and just more community to the space, depending on the size of the group and stuff, obviously. But you might not be able to just squeeze into one tent to hang out, but you might want something like a tarp. And plus, being outside with the tarp was also pretty. We kind of had 2 tarps, so it didn't work out this way. But typically, if you had a tarp, you could pitch it in a way where you could still see outside. See kind of for us, just the beauty of Zion and these big, massive walls and whatnot. So I think that was just one thing to consider when you're going into these conditions. And I think our tarps weigh sub 1 pound for sure for a Stone Island tarp. Mm-hmm. So it's not a big weight penalty to throw something in like that. But anyway, so then we go to bed. How'd you guys all sleep?
I slept amazing.
Quite good.
It was comfy.
Way better than at home.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember we were talking to someone. I was kind of telling them, it was Dan's videographer Emmett. Just kind of saying because he kept talking about how he hasn't had this amazing night sleeping outside and stuff, and I asked him well, are you expecting to sleep for 8 hours straight, and sleep like you're in an exact climate controlled environment in a perfectly dark room on a $1,000 mattress with perfect blankets, and it's just not going to be like that. You are sleeping outside at some point, but honestly, what I've been noticing the last few times I've gone out is that when you nail your sleep system and the layers that you're wearing to get your temperature right, and these newer pads that I've been sleeping on, I get better, longer sleep here than I do at home, where my kids could come running in or need a glass of water in the middle of the night, or what, you know what I mean? Or even just your wife turns over and kicks you or something on accident. I'm just solo in my own tent. No one's waking me up, and I've been getting phenomenal sleep in the backcountry lately, which probably says more about what I'm not getting at home.
Yeah, that's what it is for me. Is kids waking up. So,
but I slept super well. It rained most of the night, and I've been enjoying just that white noise of rain. It's been some of my best night's sleep this year. Has been when there's just been a light sprinkle. Well, ripping the top off your tent, blowing it around or something, but just that light little drizzle is very soothing.
I woke up at 4, and I realized the rain had stopped, and I knew the snow had started. I flipped on my light for a second, and I could see some snow. So then I listened really close to hear if Brigham was shaking the snow off of his tent.
I already had my alarm set so that if it did start snowing heavy, it's just an hour interval that I'll set it just to.
You did? You had it ready to go. It's queued up.
Well, it's queued. Yeah, I didn't have it set, but it never. It just was a really light snow. It didn't even accumulate on the tent really, but I slept peacefully.
That's awesome.
If anything, I was too warm that night. It did not get as cold as it said it would. The weather said it would, and as cold as I expected. I was at one point a bit uncomfortable because I was too warm.
What do you think it was 25?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it probably got to 30.
20s.
Yeah, something barely under 30.
Yeah.
I feel like it's usually a little bit warmer in the tents by 5 degrees is what it just kind of seems like. So yeah, high 20s would be the lowest, I'd say. I did find it interesting that everyone that came on the trip chose a top quilt rather than a sleeping bag. We kind of gave them the option what sleep system do you want to use. And I think I was the only one in a sleeping bag in the whole place. I
didn't know you were in a bag.
I just grabbed the sleeping bag, because I just had them side by side in my closet, and I'm like, yeah, sure. Snagged that one, and then I got there, and everyone used a top quilt, and I was like, man, I'm the oddball out. This is weird. But yeah, it was just kind of an interesting thing. But we'll talk a little bit more about the gear and some takeaways from this after we get through just the trip. But we got up that next morning. It was, we slept until 8. We slept in longer.
Well, the
than
hope
usual.
was that, that canyon runs east and west. So we were hoping we could get a little bit of direct sunlight on our tents before we had to pack them up. But that didn't matter because we all woke up at 8 and the sun should have been on the tents, but there was still too much fog and clouds and stuff for us to get any direct light. So
Yeah, I think once we realized that, we started getting out of the shelters, and we decided to do a little side canyon hike up to Kolob Arch, which is, Tyler knows this, but I think it's the
seventh largest natural arch in the world.
Big old arch. It's an interesting one because you're so far below. It's about 3/4 of a mile up to where you can see it, and then once you get up there, it's so far away that it's hard to get perspective on just how big it was. But we stayed there long enough this time that I just started like looking at the little details, like how big the trees are right by it and stuff. And it is a massive arch. It's pretty spectacular. But I think the best part about this is when we woke up that next morning, especially, there was just a super clearly defined line of snow up on the cliffs above us. Because basically they're cliffs. There's like a cliff line, and then it's just a solid cliff for hundreds and hundreds of feet down to the bottom of the canyon. And right above the cliff, just white, beautiful, capped cliffs. And then, right below is just these orange-red, beautiful cliffs. And so it was phenomenal.
Then down where we were at, because it's, lower elevation stuff still, and there's still leaves on the trees that were yellow, and there's really bright, beautiful colors. And so we had just so much color and beauty going on. You had the leaves, the red sandstone cliffs are, hundreds of feet tall, and
for a little while, blue sky.
Yeah, blue sky above the snow caps, and then it was really pretty.
It really was. Again, just encourage you. I'm sure we've got some Instagram photos up already. Go to our YouTube channel, watch that video when it comes out. But it was probably the most spectacular morning you could have in that canyon. It's just as far as pure views go. We've been in that canyon 3-4 times as a company, and that was definitely the best views we've ever had in there for sure.
I like how quiet the snow makes everything. Like when the wind dies down.
You're talking about like how it keeps everyone out.
Well, that and no, mostly how the snow has like a sound dampening effect. Where like things don't echo as much, the wind doesn't sound as loud, and when it is calm, it just sounds extra quiet. And that morning was like that for sure.
Yeah. Wet, damp sand. Sand's just quiet in general too. It was peaceful. It was a really, really nice morning. I think that's kind of the case in both the previous day and this day. Is when it's super nice, you sometimes you drag your feet just a little bit more and take your time. Like if we had gone just cut 20 minutes out of hiking in, we probably would have all pitched our tents without it being raining on us. And that kind of is what happened when we got to the end of this trail too. So we come back, we'd already packed up our stuff, so we basically threw it in the packs. No, maybe we hadn't, but we got it in the packs and started down the trail, and started to it was snowing on us, really. It wasn't rain, was it?
It was light snow.
Yeah, kind of a sleet. And started hiking out. It was kind of clouds, got a little bit of blue skies for a second, and then as we turned to go up this other canyon that goes up towards the trailhead where we had shuttled another car to, the farther we went up that canyon, the worse the weather really got. And the last 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles of it, it was just a full-on snowstorm coming down on us. Could have done without it, but it was at the same time. It was good. It
made the photos
hit us,
even better.
Yeah, and it hit us right as we're doing that climb, so it was like good cooling off effect. Just mainly just got your cars dirty. It was the biggest negative.
The only bummer about that, well, I guess not the only bummer, but for me the biggest bummer about that scenario of how we ended the trail was, we started out the whole trip with a picnic at the trailhead we started at, and then we were going to end it with another picnic at this trailhead. Which this trailhead is right in Kolob Canyon and kind of at the top end of it, where you have some really pretty views on a clear day of some amazing rock formations. But because of the snow and the clouds being so low, you couldn't hardly see any of it. Plus, everybody was like really cold at that point from the wind, and nobody had stopped to put on additional layers. Like we all had enough gear; we could have been warm, but a lot of people just hadn't stopped to do it. And so everyone at that point decided, no, we're not going to have a picnic. We're going to just leave, eat in the trucks, or...
Just sucks when you stop. You go from hiking uphill in cold weather, you might have the right number of layers on, then you go to a dead stop and it's like, yeah, I either got to throw on more layers or I'm just going to get in the car. And I think most of us just were like, let's just get in the car and get out of here. But it was an awesome trip. Awesome trip for sure. As promised, though, I want to go backwards and talk to the listeners about, what things can they do to be comfortable in these type of conditions where it's, let's just call it like sleet conditions, where it's like going from rain to snow to rain to snow. It gets everything really wet.
We also
sticks to you really well.
We had a lot of wind exposure the first hike in. It's just this huge flat plateau where there was going to be a lot of wind. So a little bit of everything as far as weather goes.
I think this is a really, really perfect opportunity to remind everybody that we have on our website what's called a 10-piece adaptive layering system. And what that is, it's a guide, and you can kind of go through and depending on what situations you're planning on being in, there's recommendations for what types of gear will be best. And all combined, it's basically 10 items, apparel items, that covers basically all you need for really, if you have these 10, you can handle any scenario in the outdoors almost, except for the most extreme stuff. And so I think a lot of what we're about to talk about is going to fit into that. If you don't get enough out of the following conversation, follow it up, go check out our website, look for the 10-piece adaptive layering system.
Yeah, me and Brigham did a podcast on that as well. It's already been recorded. It may come out after this one where we talk about the principles of that, but definitely applies, it applies everywhere. So, but going into this, right, we've been doing a lot of summer, some fall camping, but when you're coming into a scenario like this, what's some of the first thing you guys reach for, or what are your favorite pieces of gear to add to your kit this time of year?
Well, to set the stage, we were forecast for low 20s at night with some pretty high wind gusts and rain and sleet and snow. Like, we're pretty much guaranteed precipitation overnight. So we just knew it was going to be much colder than trips we'd done previously this summer and fall.
I think one of the things, I guess, to be gained if you listen to Derek's advice about reading that, a lot of in my opinion, the most important aspect is not the what, it's the why in that clothing system article. Because if you understand the why, you'll realize that not much changes from summer to winter. The concepts are the same for what you pack, because the why is all still the same. Like, you're still trying to accomplish the same things with your clothing. The clothing just changes a little bit. So I'm still always going to have something on my lower half and something on, my base layer on the top. And then you want to look at what the conditions are and what those conditions create in terms of challenges for your clothing and how it accomplishes what it's supposed to do. But in reality, for me, it just changes very little. It's in the summertime, I'm either going to be hiking in a pair of pants or shorts. I'm always going to be wearing a long sleeve base layer top as my next to skin. And I'm always going to take either a mid layer that is also my insulating layer, or I'm going to take a mid layer and then an insulating outer layer on top of that. And then I'm almost always taking some kind of water rain protection. And especially lately, I've been taking some wind protection as well. So the only thing that changes for me is my insulating layer just gets more warm, and that's pretty much it.
It is pretty dang amazing, and I've been thinking about that concept a lot of just there's not much that needs to change. For me, when I look at it, it's like I have a couple decisions to make. Typically in the summer, I'm going to take either a wind jacket or wind jacket and pants or a rain jacket and pants. So I just have to make that decision, and then basically underneath that, it's all the same. It's just how much insulation do I want to put underneath that layering system for me for that specific trip. I might go from, say, bringing a Vario jacket to bringing, a Nova UL or a Nova Pro jacket, just upping that insulation category. Or maybe I'm bringing a Ventus and one of these other pieces to add it into more a little bit more of an adaptive layering system if I need to be mobile or something in a piece like the Ventus. But it is pretty interesting how if you're doing it right in the summer months and you've got a system that works in the summer months, it's just adding a couple more layers and you're set. I mean, and the same kind of goes to gloves and things like that. Like, I really like having some kind of a shell for my gloves, because I've found personally that by just stopping the the wind on your hands. A lot of times I don't need a big heavy set of gloves. I just need to be able to stop the wind from, and I don't mean like a liner glove. I mean like a wind or rain shell on my hands. But being able to use those, I think has been, it just works the same. And like your ability to use a shell, whether that's a wind piece or a rain piece, correctly, really reduces the amount of stuff that I think you need overall. So. I mean, and I think we covered that pretty heavily in this other podcast that we'll hit again. So, yeah. I think that's a part of it. I think. What about like the actual gear storage? Do you do anything different with processes? Do you do anything different to keep your gear dry? Just anything like that can build over time, moisture built over time, etc. Anything come to mind for you guys?
Well, I did. I mean. Something that I did was a little bit unique, and I don't think this is how you would normally hike, because I brought both rain protection and wind protection on this trip. A lot of that was just kind of trying to get familiar with the two together and similar conditions and which ones I kind of prefer. Typically, you can use a rain layer or a rain protection layer as a windbreaker as well. It just might not breathe as well, but I always stored those on the outside of my pack, easy to grab in like a stretch mesh pocket. And any other layer that I wasn't wearing, that stayed inside my pack so it could stay dry, and that was it. And the only things that I really had out there were those two things. So as far as storage goes, that's how I did it. A lot of what I was wearing on the trail just was basically a base layer supplemented by either wind protection or rain protection, except for, I guess, day 2 in the morning when it was quite a bit colder than day 1. I did have like a mid layer underneath the rain protection, but
yeah. One of the things I appreciate doing is just making sure that I've got. It's nice that when you pitch the Fortius, it pitches like keeping everything dry inside the tent as you're pitching it. So like the inside of your tent isn't like if you have a tent that pitches and then you put the rainfly on second, your tent can get wet on the inside, right? Which isn't a massive factor, but the thing that I stress in these conditions is the compounding effect of getting wet. So a little bit of moisture here, a little bit of moisture here, a little bit of moisture here, all adds up to, basically getting soaked at some point. And so what I do is I loved, one of the reasons I love the shadow light, honestly, I just love it is the ability to like pull my tent out of the very bottom of the shadow light, keep everything in there, out of the elements, etc. Pitch the tent and then throw my tent straight, or my bag straight into the tent, and then unpack it with no moisture getting on any of the contents inside of it. So just being conscious of stuff like that goes a long ways, because the more moisture you get, it just starts compounding. And especially if this was a multi-day, trip, like for us and this one, it was one night, and so I think we sometimes bypass some things we'd be conscious of if this was a 3 or 4 night trip. I personally would be very, very conscious of not getting any layers wet. So like, on this trip, like maybe in the next morning, I might throw on a Nova Pro, and let's say it starts raining. I'm going to be like, this thing's got amazing, rain resistancy. I don't think it's going to rain that long. I'm just going to I'm going to ride it out. Versus if it's a multi-day trip even if I had to spend one more night there, I'm never going to allow that. My rain jacket's going on instantly to protect that insulation, make sure that no moisture could, even just get clung to the fabric. And then when you go to put it away, you're compressing that jacket with the moisture still touching the outside fabric. And that compound effect, I think, is something you just got to be really conscious of, and it pays long-term dividends for sure. What about, okay, this is kind of a new one this year. Brigham, maybe explain the benefits of bringing a camp towel or a tent towel. I've seen you use it more this year than...
Yeah. I don't even know. I just use these little square microfiber rags that you get like at Walmart. And I don't know what they weigh, maybe an ounce. I just use them to wipe down the inside of my tent, even the inside of my vestibule, like kind of the exterior part of the fly, just because it, honestly, especially on multi-day, it saves you a bunch of weight so that you're not carrying all that water clung to the tent. But then in a trip like this one where there's definitely condensation, you're at the base of a canyon, the bottom of a canyon. There's a creek going by, and it rained for hours before you even got in the tent. Rain transitioned to snow. There's no avoiding condensation, but having the towel or the rag to just wipe the inside surface of the tent, it's really helpful because it's just a repeating process. So you're going to soak the rag dozens of times. So you wipe a few square feet, wring it out on the ground outside the vestibule, and then just repeat that until the whole inside is basically dry. And then, like on earlier trips this year, I did it, on the inside of the vestibule, on the outside of the tent, just so I'm not packing out like an extra pound of water. But yeah, it's a really helpful tip.
It works super good. I borrowed Brigham's his little rag there when we did the Uinta Highline. It was the first time I kind of tried that with his rag. And yeah, my tent was basically entirely dry inside and out, after I used that. It was really nice to not have to pack really any extra water weight.
I think it makes a big difference too to just be conscious of that too, because if you were to put your tent away wet or even damp, and then you fold it up, there is a way you can definitely fold your tents to keep the inside away from the outside, not get them cross mingled, so that if there is moisture on the outside of your tent, it's not getting inside there. And then when you go to pitch it the next night, now you've got moisture inside the tent, even though the tent didn't leak, but just it transferred in there during the roll process, rolling it up, stuffing it, etc. So I think that is something to be conscious of, is that, that you're going to wipe the inside of your tent, but not the outside. Fold it up in a way that you're not getting the inside soaked by touching the outside fabric and whatnot. I think this is, I don't know, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately, but just going back to even just a trekking pole shelter in general, we were all using Fortius tents, and just like the expectations and considerations with it. I think one of the fallacies that gets talked about a lot is that there's more condensation inside of a single wall shelter, and that's not true. You just don't have the extra barrier to avoid touching it, or if it does, fall off of the outside shell onto the mesh, it doesn't necessarily fall directly onto you. So I just kind of didn't want to touch that, but just been thinking a lot about trekking pole shelters and stuff. And man, I'm like a huge advocate of trekking pole shelters, but I will say there are some things to consider with them, which is just getting familiar with them, investing a little bit of time, pitching your tent, taking it down, pitching your tent and whatnot is going to save you basically half the weight of a different type of shelter. And then I think just as far as expectations, it's really good to see in pictures and photos, perfectly pitched trekking pole shelters. But in the field, walking around, looking at everyone's shelters out there, etc., trekking pole shelters don't always look perfectly pitched. I think the better, the more you use them, the more you can get them to have perfect tautness everywhere, with knowing how to adjust a few things. And I need to make a video on just troubleshooting a pitch to fix if you've got a crease going somewhere in it. But I think there's some expectations and things to consider there, as far as it doesn't always look like that, the website's perfect, perfectly pitched on a grass lawn tent. But man, I could not go backwards to a pulled tent unless I was compelled by something considerable in the design or specific for a unique trip, or something like that. And I think that was just on my mind because we were bringing these people that had never used one. And so I'm kind of thinking well, what are they thinking right now? Well, what are they thinking right now? And I don't know what their experience was with the trekking pole shelter, but I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but it was something that was on my mind during that trip for sure.
The condensation thing is definitely much more a symptom of where you're camped than what shelter you're using and what the weather is. When it gets that cold, your tent is going to capture more condensation from your breath than when it's not as cold. So that alone, then the fact that it had been raining, we're setting up on muddy ground, we're next to a stream, we're in a canyon. There was just a lot, so I think everyone got some condensation, but those tents are quite spacious too, compared to a lot of the really tight freestanding tents that you get, where even if it's double walled, you're still going to be rubbing up into it in those tight little tents. So
yeah, this trip I had actually brought a 2-person tent, and so I was living like a king in that thing, loving life,
sleeping in your mansion over there.
Yeah, I had all the sorts of, but that 2-person tent is still significantly lighter than a 1-person pulled tent. There's some considerations, but I think it was just stark because to me, I had a phenomenal pitch, phenomenal experience in the tent. But I'll just say it, like, at least one of the pitches that were underneath the tree in like a bowled out area, like between roots, and you know what I mean? Like, the pitch wasn't great, even with me troubleshooting it. I got it to where it was good, but it was still like, basically, I heard them say, like, as I was getting into my tent, that basically the bowl that they had pitched in was like accumulating water underneath the tent. And she said that she didn't get any moisture underneath it, right? Or like in her tent still because of that bathtub floor. But I don't know. I was just kind of thinking of the different pitches and different experiences people are having with the first time with them. And I think there's just considerations to have with the trek and pull tent. To me, massive benefits as long as you're familiar with the product, So anyways, I'll say that was my favorite piece of gear on this trip. Let's go around the table real quick and just have you guys call out your favorite piece of gear on this trip, and then we'll follow that with if there's any gear you would have left behind.
Well, I think one of my favorite pieces of gear was probably my long-handled spoon.
It's always a good one.
Really enjoy.
Pivotal piece of gear, man. You end up on the trail without a spoon. Just ask Tyler. It's awkward.
I just really enjoyed hanging out and eating my backpacker meal, and underneath the tarp, just using that spoon was just, I don't know, just like the cherry on top of the whole experience. Just the cherry on top.
All right.
All my gear works great, but the spoon was just nice.
Anything else stand out to you guys?
I have a 3-way tie. Is that allowed?
We'll decide after you.
All right. They're all from the same related circumstance, but so the tarp, I don't pack a tarp most of the time because I pack a trekking pole tent, and the tarp is like maybe an essential for a hammock camper or someone who's going to be cowboy camping. But because I have the tent, I haven't used the tarp as much, but those tarps are pretty nice for how light they are. So that's one. The other one was the dice, because that provided a whole lot of entertainment.
I was going to say.
And then the other one was the sawtooth pants, because I literally got like
dumped on,
like an entire leg completely dumped on and drenched, and I had my pants dry out fully 2 different times while we were eating dinner and playing dice. Then the third time it dumped on me was right before bed, and I was like, well, I need these to be dry in the morning, so I'm going to sleep with them wet, and they were dry within a couple of hours in my top quilt. So,
yeah, I don't know if you noticed. I think at least the last one, MT pushed the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But
we have to talk about this. I can't believe we almost missed this.
Yeah.
How is your stove? Tyler put his stove through the most durable, intense stress test I've ever seen. Basically, it was when the water was like pooling up and then rolling off this tarp, it was dumping straight into his stove. And then it would tip over and get sand in the stove. And it was like a rinse and repeat cycle for a few hours.
Well, there's a lot of
I started to question Tyler's sanity and his employment, but did it survive?
Look, you need hard gear users to know that you've tested everything fully. We sell that stove in the Live Ultralight membership, and it works great. I used it in the morning with no problem. My lighter, on the other hand, did not work in the morning, but my stove was just fine.
Well, there you have it, guys. You can dump water and sand
and pine needles
in your stove, and it'll still work.
Mm-hmm.
But if it doesn't, It's not our fault.
Contact Tyler on customer support and
I'm gonna talk to Tyler about that.
Yeah, I'll give you
specifically request Tyler.
Yeah. No, it was good. I had a great time. No complaints.
Brigham?
Man, I'm trying to think of what my favorite piece is, or favorite piece of gear for that trip. I think
I got one. I got a question for you. I was just noticing your sharp looking haircut there, and I'm wondering if you wore a balaclava that night. You are like an adamant user of like, I don't wear a balaclava unless it's sub 20 degrees or something.
No, I probably wouldn't do it unless it's sub 15.
See, and I'm the opposite. I wear our Lofttech balaclava
Tayson,
low 30s. I'm like, pile it on.
Tayson brings like every accessory, every possible layer in June. He'll bring booties in June. He'll bring a balaclava in May. He's wearing like zip-offs and 3 jackets for 20 minutes in the morning.
I do second that. Tayson
has...
And then
what
he's
is
like,
this? You guys
how do
see
I have
my
such
gear
a hard
list?
time fitting all this in a
online.
40-liter
We
pack?
see you pulling out this gear. Like, dude, you brought that for 2 seconds?
I bring thermals, and I've worn thermals. Yes, I'll give you that. Booties in the summer? I don't remember this.
You bring everything, man. You bring it all.
I do bring the balaclava most of the time. I have found that it's like to me, I guess it's like I can bring like a little beanie or something like that, or I can bring the balaclava for like another ounce. And so usually I'm just gonna bring the balaclava. I will say this too: my beard looks better after I've slept with the balaclava than other things, and so rather than like have this. I don't know. If I'm not going to like braid it or put it in a ponytail, that is a consideration I have to.
That just reminded me of the movie Christmas Vacation, where they're like out sledding, and he's talking about putting the spraying the grease on the dish before he goes down, and Uncle Eddie, or Cousin Eddie's like, no, because if I hit my head, my part, it's just not going to look the same. My beard.
Yeah.
If I don't wear a sleeve with a balaclava, my beard's just
That's
not
a
going to look
small
right.
consideration, all right.
So to answer your question, no, I just slept in my little. It's just a 100 weight. I think it's just a polar fleece beanie.
Okay, you have something. You're not. Do you ever sleep in a hood and that, or just the beanie? Did you sleep in a Ventus or anything?
No, I slept in just a top and bottom, just some prototype stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think like warm base layer. Leggings and top, and then, fleece beanie and 15-degree top quilt, and I was
so there is some different. I mean, here's a preference thing. I take a balaclava when I'm into like the mid to low 30s. I'll start bringing a balaclava. Brigham's negative 30. So on your favorite
body types. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Now, favorite piece of gear. Trying to decide if I should even mention this one because it's under development, so I don't know. It's probably not quite legal yet. So I'll just go with the top quilt. Top quilt kept me.
That was a hard tease.
Top quilt kept me
tuned.
a little too warm at times, but it's a security item.
A 15 degree?
15 degree top quilt.
Oh, I have one more favorite piece of gear, actually. I just remembered. This one is awesome. Tyler actually handmade it. So, Tayson, earlier you mentioned, especially for this type of trip.
Dude, that's an accessory. You're just bringing all the accessories in the world here, Derek.
Yeah.
Look at you bringing these accessories.
I brought it, man. I did. I'll own that. But you mentioned earlier bringing those glove, I don't know what you call them, glove
shells or liner.
Yeah. It's basically like a waterproof glove mitten thing. And Tyler had made it out of an old, beat-up, torn-up tarp that we had. So it was this 20 denier fabric, I believe, and seam-sealed it and stuff. So he just cut out and sewed some little mittens, and those blocked both the rain, snow, and the wind, both day 1 and day 2 for me. And they're just, nice because they weigh less than 1 ounce, far less than 1 ounce.
Like a quarter of an ounce.
Yeah, and they just fit in, any pocket anywhere, and they pack up into nothing.
Seriously, they take no space.
And I never had cold hands ever, so that was awesome. I didn't have any glove liners or anything. It was literally just a
the
rain
shell.
shell.
Just stopping that that airflow, like stealing the heat off, makes all the difference. It's a significant upgrade. Okay, anything you guys would have left behind on this trip? Something you didn't use, wasn't worth the wait? I'll go first. I packed in probably 5 pounds of candy for this video. Turns out I only needed like 1, maybe 2. So I could have brought a whole lot less candy on this trip. Anyways, that was mine.
If you would have brought 5 pounds of not freeze-dried candy, I probably would have eaten at least
if I hadn't ruined the gummies by freeze-drying them.
All the candy, freeze-dried.
Yeah, it was like freeze-dried candy is really good, but when you have nothing but, it's like it's a good add-on or mixture in.
Well, let's amend that statement. Some freeze-dried candy is really good.
The one that's like after it's freeze-dried seems the least freeze-dried. That's the best freeze-dried candy. So basically, the gummies that are hardly even freeze-dried after they're freeze-dried, that taste almost like the normal thing. Those ones are pretty good.
But I did like the freeze-dried High Chews and Skittles. Those are pretty good.
Yeah, the High Chews were good. The Skittles were really good too. No, I'll think if there's anything else I would have not taken. But anything else from you? Any gear you would have left behind? Or
That's a. Well, I realized that I have this little, I don't know, this pre-packed bag of things that are essential for most backpacking trips. Things like a lighter, a little bit of bug spray, a tiny little thing of sunscreen. Definitely did not need sunscreen. But I mean, it was like maybe an ounce.
Sometimes it's just not worth unpacking.
Exactly, it wasn't worth unpacking
for a 13-mile trip.
I definitely didn't need that. I mean, most everything else I actually used and enjoyed. I guess the other thing that was pretty optional that I did bring along, I don't know if I would leave it behind though, but I brought like hand warmers, and it was like the first time I've used hand or foot warmers in the last 5-6 years. And I didn't need them, but they were just kind of nice, It's just like, oh, well, in the morning after I get up, and I usually pack up my stuff faster than some of the other people in our team, and so I'm kind of waiting around. I just had hand warmers in my pockets, and I'm like, well, this is not necessary, but it's super nice.
Yeah, I threw some hand warmers in the bottom of my bag. Threw 2 of them in the bottom of my bag when I went to bed, and I woke up too hot. Took one of them, threw it out of my bag, and then was borderline hot the rest of the night. But I think it's worth saying, even taking a single hand warmer, tossing it in the bottom of your sleeping bag where it doesn't get a ton of oxygen, but like can kind of slow burn all night. Something to consider for winter backpacking.
Yeah, like I said, they're nice, but out of all my gear, that would probably be the first thing to be left behind if I had to choose something to leave behind.
They're definitely not ultralight weight like for what they are, but they're not also like crazy heavy. Tyler, anything?
I packed like some extra cold weather items for people, like just
in case
contingencies.
Some babysitting items.
Yeah, but no, like it wasn't needed, and everyone was pretty comfy, so didn't need that. But
nice.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't not bring it just because I think having a level of preparedness in your clothing system is good. I didn't even wear my Ventus. I packed that for my mid-layer under the Nova Pro, but I never used it. So that night we stayed up. I was just in base layer, Nova Pro, and rain jacket. And but I would still probably take it because, you never know.
yeah.
And then I didn't use my water filter, and so I always keep water purification tablets in my little bag.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I mean, could have done without that too.
I think that's going to be a goal of mine this year, is to just use more water purification tablets when it makes sense, and it just doesn't make sense to
when the water's clear.
Yeah, and just get comfortable with it, right? Because actually, when I was thinking about the Tusher mountain race, there, like when I got my hydration was getting super far off, and I was passing these streams that I probably could have drinking out of, no problem. But like I had some water purification tablets deep in my pack. I could have stopped. I could have got them out. I could have put them in. But I was like, what's that? Is that going to mess, is that going to mess with my stomach? Like I've never done, my stomach's already growing crazy. People complain about the taste, but just like getting familiar with even contingencies, I think is a good thing. And I think like in retrospect, I would have been the same as you. Like that would have been a great time to leave the water filter, bring those, and just like, because I probably would have only done that to 1 liter of water. And so it would have been a non-issue if it didn't work, if I didn't like it, but it's just, but you just get comfortable with it. It's more about just getting comfortable with different options on trips that aren't extreme trips, right?
Yeah, and that some of that like comes into trip planning too. Like on this trip, at basically the halfway point, basically right by our campsite, there was a full like pure spring
coming right out of the rock.
Like that's a safe to drink out of the source spring, and you know what I mean. Like just have it. Of course, I still bring my water filter, and I never filled up any water. I packed in 4 liters of water total, and that was adequate for the entire trip. So I didn't even get water out of the spring, didn't filter it, didn't treat it. So
yeah,
some of that just in the planning phase, you can kind of like look at, okay, well, here's a spring. And after the spring, there's 6 miles left of the hike. So I could fill up 4 liters in theory of water there, and that's plenty.
Okay. Well, I think let's go ahead and call it here, guys. This has been a pretty interesting one. Hopefully you guys learn more about how to either take carry gear or adjust gear to camp in those, we'll call them sleet-like conditions, borderline snow. I think you guys should really consider visiting national parks in the winter. It's definitely a phenomenal time to get out there. More likely to get permits you want, more likely to avoid any kind of crowds, but also just see a national park in a different way than anyone else gets to see it. And hopefully you just picked up some other gear tips and whatnot. So again, I want to start doing more question answer things on this podcast. So if you guys do have questions, leave them on the comment section on the YouTube channel. So we have a YouTube channel where you can watch or listen to these podcasts. We do record these, both video and audio. So you can watch them there, but leave a comment there for us to answer, or email us at liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com, where we can answer those questions as well live over the air. So if you've got questions, if you're interested in anything, you wonder why, Brigham does some weird thing that he does, or, Tyler sews things out of tarps, whatever, just any questions you got, send them our way. We happen to answer them on the podcast. And if you have yet to rate or review the podcast, please also do that. That helps us further our mission here at Outdoor Vitals, but also, just get in front of more people, help more people.
Is there going to be a link for the clothing system article in the
Yeah, so
podcast
it
page?
depends on where you're listening from, but if you're listening or watching this podcast on YouTube, there will be a link in the description to the 10-piece adaptive layering system. We'll try to put links in anywhere that displays links, but
otherwise, typically you can click on the cover art and get access to show notes. You can find links in there for we'll put the adaptive layering system links in there, and we'll also just put a link to go shop our Black Friday sale. So again, just last little shameless plug here. It is our Black Friday sale. This is our biggest sale of the entire year, site-wide savings. Those savings go on top of, already discounted items. So even if you want to shop in the clearance section, something's already marked down 20%. Now you're going to get another 10 or 15% off of that, plus get these free items. The Pyro Putty Fire Starter, the No-So patch kit. Both of those are like tried and true. I mean, I have used a single Pyro Putty for a few years. Like, they last a long time. You can use a little bit, goes a long ways. Even in winter camping, when I'm camping,
but not in Zion.
Not in Zion. Oh, we didn't even touch on that, man. I actually had a dream that Tyler started a fire down here in Zion, and that we got kicked out for life, and all. I don't know. I forgot about that on the trail, like in Zion's. This is the dream that I had that night. But other than that, I had a restful night's sleep. But anyways, go shop this. The Pyro Putty's awesome. You can get the 1/8-inch foam pads. Those go with us everywhere now. If you don't have an 1/8-inch foam pad, you need one. If you have one, you know that over time they will wear out and you'll need to replace it. So spend $250, you get a foam pad. You break the $500 mark, you're going to get a dry bag. Those dry bags.
And the foam pad.
And the foam pad. And the Pyro Putty or No-So patch. But yeah, the dry bag, staple. We use it for stuffing sleeping bags or top coats into clothing items. it's that safety inside of your pack to make sure everything is staying completely dry. But also it really compresses your gear. You can use a dry bag to compress your gear very, very well inside your pack. So super good staple items that are good, and you can get them for free when you shop during the Black Friday sale. So this will be open until next Monday. Do you know the day of the week?
That'd be the 21st. So after the 21st, this sale is over, and you won't be able to get these same deals or free bonus gear. So make sure you go check it out now. Like I said earlier, we do have installment plans available. If you're short on funds, you can select that during checkout, and you can break your payment into 4 separate interest-free payments over the next few months. In addition to all these savings, the discounts, the free gear, really this is the best time to shop outdoor gear.
For sure.
All of the gear on our website is tried and proven. Tayson's mentioned that a few times, but we've tested it. We're out in the field. We want you guys to have confidence in the gear you're using, and we can promise you that you will because we have confidence in it, and we've used it, like Tyler, dumping water and pine needles and stuff. So this stuff works.
It's a professional, guys. He's a professional gear tester, just so you know.
It's worth taking a look over at the website for sure.
You can hire Tyler to test your gear if you need him. It's a hefty charge, but he will do it for you.
Just doing my duty.
Yeah, it's a great time. Pick up a new jacket, anything like that. It's now jacket season. We've been watching our jacket sales. Obviously we launched the Vario last month. Excuse me. Ventuses have been flying out the door. The Nova line is phenomenal. If you don't know what the Nova line is, you need to go look at that with the stitchless fabric and the down OT. But it's been awesome. Sales started off super hot. Make sure you get your stuff while you can, while it's in stock. Just wanted to make sure that you guys on the podcast that have made it this long are aware of it. You guys are our diehards. We really appreciate you guys. And with that, make sure you guys are subscribed, and we'll catch you on a future episode.